ask people, have you ever wondered the similarity between the game baseball and cricket? In both games, we have background, we have people throwing a ball. But does it mean that the umpire of a baseball game, can that umpire be an umpire in cricket? No. Why? Because he doesn't know the rules and regulations. For every research, there are rules and regulations. In short, in some literature, they said they are the basic components of research: the ontology, epistemology, and methodology. So what does this ontology mean? They are beliefs about the nature of reality. You ask questions like, what exists? What is the truth? What is reality? Let me bring it home for you people. Now, the present ASU strike. As a quantitative researcher, don't worry, I'm going to be comparing the two. As a quantitative researcher, there is the problem of strike, right? Yes. Meanwhile, from literature, we know that one reason why ASU is going on strike is the non-fulfillment of promises made by the government, right? Yes. One of the promises is what? UTAS. Now, that is from literature. In research, we have to prove that. In quantitative research, we have to prove that. And so, we'll go out. We have many branches of ASU in Nigeria, right? We now sample. In qualitative research, we don't go that way. The same problem, ASU strike. But then, we'll go through different branches of ASU. Want to hear their own meanings. Want to see their own perspective on why they are on strike. And so we have a demarcation. In quantitative research, we believe there is one truth that can be measured objectively using standard measurement tools. In qualitative research, we don't measure. We just want to see, understand the meanings that people have for that particular phenomenon. What do I mean? I mean that in quantitative researches, because we are looking for cause and effect, we naturally measure objectively. Right? Everything in the research must be real, and that's why the ontology for quantitative research is realism. But today I'm not here to tell you about realism. I'm here to tell you about relativism, which is the ontology for qualitative research. So what does relativity mean? Relativity means there are multiple realities. There's no one truth. And that is why in the example for the strike, the qualitative researcher want to hear the perspective of different groups of different branches on the phenomenon of strike. We have, right now, we have ASU members, even in ABU's area, that believe it is uncalled for. We have some, like me, that are seriously on it. We like what is happening. But then, how do we know reality if we don't ask the people in their real life situations? Next slide. So, these philosophies that you see today, they are the bottom line. They are the platform in research from which decisions are made in research. For every philosophy, you will see that we look at the same problem from different perspectives. Take a look at what is on my slide. That is an elephant, right?
Yes, sir.
And there are people all around it. The person in front of it just sees this tusk and he said, this is a spear. The person that is underneath that sees the trunk of the elephant says it is a snake. The person that is by the leg says it is a tree. The person on the ladder sees it as a wall. The person behind sees the tail as a rope. The person up there sees the ear as a fan. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the description of subjectivism. We're saying knowledge is nothing but the meanings that individuals give to a particular phenomenon. So, in this case, you can see that from the perspective of each of these individuals, they see the elephant differently. It also applies to the number 6. Your perspective will decide whether it is 6 or 9. Right? It has to do with where you're coming from. Now, the epistemology is the belief about knowledge. Knowledge of what? Now, what are the knowledge claims in a particular methodology? In qualitative research, the knowledge claims, I'll tell you the knowledge claims. They believe that knowledge is context bound. What do I mean? If you do this in Nigeria, somebody will slap you, right? Why? It's an insult, right? But if you do this in India, somebody can just tell you, no, but stay. He thinks you are greeting him. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now it's all about subjective meanings. And so, in qualitative researches, what we do is to aggregate the different experiences that people have. These experiences are nothing but the meanings that I have for a particular phenomenon. And that is why in qualitative researches, we don't study 2 or more variables. We study one phenomenon. And that is why in qualitative researches, our samples are not a representation of the population. Our samples are, we sample for what we call analytical generalization. Qualitative researches start. What the other speaker said is very, very true. In quantitative researches, researches are geared towards testing hypotheses. In qualitative researches, please listen to this very well. In quantitative researches, we develop hypotheses at the end. That is confusing, right? I will tell you why it is confusing. In quantitative researches, you have 2 or more variables, right? Yes. So for you to hypothesize, you need variables, right? Qualitative researches, the product of qualitative researches are variables. And these variables are what constitute a theory. And it is from these variables that we can now hypothesize and now test the hypothesis. Next slide. Now, methodology. This refers to how a researcher systematically designs a study to ensure valid and reliable results that address the aims and objectives of the research. Now, in particular, this presentation is about qualitative research. So what is qualitative research? Next slide. Somebody asked the last speaker that is research an activity or a process. Oga, are you listening? That is you.
I'm listening.
Listen to this. Research is both. It is both a process and an activity. I'll tell you why. In quantitative researches, we look for cause and effect. Right?
Yes.
The process, it is a process to look for cause and effect. The process involves collecting data systematically and then developing designs and then sampling from a population. In qualitative research, it's also an activity and also a process. But then my definition reads that it is an umbrella term that encompasses interpretative techniques that are geared towards describing, exploring, coming to terms with the meaning of naturally occurring phenomena in the social world. So you see, the research is geared towards meaning, perception of people. It has nothing to do with we are going to generalize. And that is why, for you to evaluate a qualitative research, you need different parameters, different rules. And that was why I gave the analogy of baseball and cricket. They might look the same, but then the rules are different. Next slide. Okay. So, if you have to evaluate a qualitative research, for instance, you look at the topic, there is just one variable. And people will now say, which one is the dependent, which one is the independent variable? That's the major fight we have. You naturally tell them, this is a qualitative research, we are interested in a phenomenon. One phenomenon. And the focus of a qualitative research is nothing but we want to see the meanings that people have for a particular phenomenon. So the watchword here is what? Phenomenon. Meanwhile, qualitative researches are focused on meaning. These are the futures of qualitative research. Now, qualitative researches study the meanings of phenomenon under real-life conditions for those involved. It is also geared towards understanding how people interpret their experiences. Let me give you an example. If I ask anybody in this gathering, is fire hot? Everybody will agree with me, right?
Yes.
But when I say describe fire, you will hear different nuances, different perspectives of fire. Do you understand that?
Yes.
When you say fire, somebody can just say something that is blue and red inside. That's his perspective of seeing fire. When you say fire, somebody says it's pink. That's his perspective of seeing fire. So you see, it is something that cannot be generalized. All these different nuances and meanings and interpretations, you cannot put them into one box. And so, qualitative researches are not geared towards generalization. You can only transfer to a similar context. Now, qualitative researches are they also examine how people construct their worlds and the meaning they attribute to their experiences. Next slide. Now, qualitative research is heavy on contextual conditions. These conditions can include social, institutional, and environmental situations. These situations influence the way meaning is constructed. How many times, ladies and gentlemen, will somebody behave in a particular way to you and you say, "Wannan mutumin, wannan bakawi ne." Do you understand? Somebody will say something and you say, "Ha, this guy is a bushman." That's because we have a frame in our heads for how bush people behave, right? Now, qualitative researches are inductive processes. Process. Just like I told you from the start, qualitative researches gather data to build concepts. They can build theories, they can also refine theories. Excuse me. You have a theory that you think, most of these theories that we use today for our researches were developed in the developed worlds, right? Yes. Now, qualitative researchers can bring these theories home. By bringing home, what do I mean? I mean, they will look at the different constructs in the theory and see which ones are applicable in our own context of developing countries. Next slide. Now, I have to warn you. The topic says we should look at global best practices in conducting qualitative research. For that, I have listed what I'm going to explain. Next slide. Central phenomenon. I said this at the start. We don't deal with variables. We deal with a central phenomenon. This phenomenon could range from anything. E-learning, it could be your behavior towards information. What we call your information behavior. It could be the way you see a particular disease. Now, attached to a central phenomenon is a central research question that is followed by associated sub-questions. Next slide. Now, let's take a look at this. Please, at the end of this, we're going to use the last two topics as an exercise. Now, the words that I have colored red are exploration, exploring. In all qualitative researches, they are geared at exploration. So in the topic, you might see exploration or exploring. What I have in green color is a particular group of people. Just like I told you, qualitative research is about meanings, experiences of a particular group to a particular phenomenon. Now, the first topic reads a qualitative exploration of female experience of ASD, autism spectrum disorder. From that topic, we'll see the three major things that you need in a qualitative research. A qualitative research is supposed to be an exploration. There's exploration there. And it is geared towards a particular set of people. You have female, and then you have a particular phenomenon. In this case, autism spectrum disorder. Let's look at the second one. The second one reads, exploring students' acceptance of e-learning through the development of a comprehensive technology acceptance model. We can see that exploring is in red, right? Yes. For who? Students, right? Yes. Phenomenon. Acceptance of e-learning. Now our exercises. Who can tell us, for instance, the phenomenon of the third topic. Miscarriage people. Thank you very much. Not just miscarriage, but miscarriage in emergency department. The group. Okay, so you see, right now, this is the secret I was keeping. That is the work on Mishai that I presented. So let's see. The phenomenon. No.
Information activities.
No. Social spaces for information activities. Group. Social actors at Mishai. Are we having a feel of what a topic that is qualitative is supposed to look like? You should have exploration, you should have a group of people, and then you should have a central phenomenon. If it were a quantitative research, you see, would say maybe the effect of Shai on another variable, right?
Yes.
Good. So next slide, please. Now, literature review. I was ecstatic when the last speaker talked about literature review. I was particularly attentive when he said your literature review is a product of the gap that you have established in your work. You can have theoretical gap, you can have methodological gap. Now, in qualitative researches, because we don't know the perception of people, we cannot predict findings. So scholars in qualitative research have advocated that our literature review should be placed when we are discussing our findings. So when we are discussing our findings, because how else would you know what relates to your work when you don't know the perspective of a particular group? Now, that does not stop you from conducting a literature review in chapter 2. But what type of literature review? Next slide. Now, some examples of literature review that can be used in qualitative research. Basically, in qualitative research, it's just like I said. You have two ways of going through qualitative researches. One, you are looking at a theory that was developed somewhere. You are domesticating it, right? And so you are looking at the perspective of people from the lens of a theory. In the work about Mishai, the theory was information grounds theory. Now, because it is a theoretical gap, I now conducted a theoretical literature review. Now listen to this type, the issues about types of literature review. Somebody asked a question about related literature review and just literature review. Literature review is the process. What do I mean? These theoretical literature reviews are supposed to help you select the literature that you will now conduct literature review on. Do you understand? I'll go back. Naturally, let me give you an example. As a man, you are supposed to marry a wife, right?
Yes.
A wife has to be a woman. Well, most times nowadays, right? Okay, so you know that you have to choose a woman, right?
Yes.
And then for the choice of woman, you need a tall, fair, black, white, whatever. Go. You have your set of qualities that you want in a woman. But then you must choose a woman, right?
Yes.
So these types of literature review will help you choose a woman. But then again, after saying this is a woman, you have to run through your own qualities that you want in a woman. So these theoretical literature reviews, for instance, will help you get all those studies that use the same theory as you. After getting them, you now perform literature review on them. Do we understand? The methodological literature review, one basic, in short, globally, the standard for a qualitative research, a basic qualitative research, is that it is a grounded theory research. Meaning, just like I said, the concepts that come out at the end of the day should form a theory. That's what grounded theory means, right? And so, grounded theory is a design. Meaning, designs are under methodology, right? So, if you're conducting a grounded theory research, you now have to do a methodological literature review. You look for literature that used grounded theory, so that at the end of the day, it is customary, especially in Ahmadu Bello University, for you to have a summary of reviews, right? Your summary of reviews have to relate to your work. Now, the relationship of these other reviews to your work is, one, through theories. You see, this theory has been used in this context, in this context, in this context, but never used in the Nigerian context. Even in the Nigerian context, it has not been used in Kaduna. You understand? Good. Next slide. Now, research designs. The last speaker said there was something like a quantitative case study. I agree, seriously agree. In qualitative, there is a qualitative case study. There are phenomenology. There is ethnography and grounded theory. Let me tell you each one and what they signify. I'll do that by, excuse me, by drawing an analogy. If a woman, God forbid, is involved in an accident, she's pregnant and she breaks an arm, is it all the doctors that will have to see her? Which are the particular doctors that must see her? Gynecologists and what? Orthopedic, based on her problem. And it is a peculiar, a very different issue. So case studies can be one of two things. You can use case study when you are trying to do what I call analytical generalization. I will get to that. You can use case study in cases where there is cases that are spectacular. Phenomenology. Phenomenology has to do with experiences. If I'm going to ask, if I'm talking about the complications, for instance, in pregnancy, am I going to ask Pakiku, a man? No. Who do I have to ask? Woman. Is this just any woman? No. Somebody that's had experience. So phenomenology, in some literature, is called lived experience. People, you want to gain knowledge from the experiences of people that have experienced the phenomenon. If we say there are complications in pregnancy, we definitely have to go to women, right? Yes. Aha, not just any woman, a woman that's been pregnant before and has had complications. Ethnography. You see, I know Katsina people in this audience will like this. The only literature on Nupe culture was written by by not a Katsina man. It was written by a woman. She is from England. She lived in Nubeland for 10 years. She studied our culture. She even knew how to speak Nupe more than most of us. And then she wrote about Nupe. That is ethnography. It has to do with people going into a particular culture to study their experiences, their social interaction, their lives, the way they make meanings of issues. Then ground theory is the last one. There are other designs, but for time. And sorry, I have to digress for a while. You see, everything we're doing here today, if you look at the curriculum, it's supposed to be a 16 weeks program, and we are putting it into 3 hours. You understand? We teach this bit by bit. Okay, next slide, please. Now, this is one area where there is serious controversy. But the controversy arises from the fact that we don't look at the philosophies of the research methodology we are using. Most qualitative researches don't even bother about population. Not because they are important, but because we don't seek to generalize to the population. And so what we do is to select participants. How do we select participants? We have what we call an inclusion criteria. Just like I told you, if you have to conduct a research on married women that have experienced complications, one of the criteria for inclusion is she must be married. In qualitative researches, we don't generalize. We do generalization, but it's called analytic generalization. And what do I mean by that? You take a theory, right? You take the constructs of the theory, and you see which one is applicable to a particular group of people. That is, they either call it analytical generalization or theoretical generalization. And so because of this, we don't generalize, we transfer. If Katsina people have bandits, will Nupe people have bandits? God forbid. No. Next slide, thank you, sir. Okay, so what sampling techniques do we use? Now, the last speaker mentioned something that was very, very important. Random selection of sample. It is a very big pillar in quantitative research. By the time you don't randomly select your sample in quantitative research, you lose one and a very important segment of quantitative research, which is generalization. So in many studies, you see quantitative scholars using convenience sampling. That moment that you have selected convenience sampling means you have lost the power of generalization. Because convenience sampling is not probability sampling technique. Now, even in the non-probability sampling technique, all the sampling techniques must be purposeful or purposive. They must be in line with the purpose of the study. The purpose of every qualitative study is to actually harness the different meanings that people have for a particular phenomenon, right? Good. So, if I'm choosing based on, let's say I'm doing a case study. In my case study, I have a particular group, I have a particular case that I want to study, right? But even in the case, there are female and male. In order to arrest the variations in the sample, I must do maximum variation sampling. I must have male and female. Now, there's this other sampling technique that is called a snowball or chain sampling technique. In snowball or chain sampling technique, you start with one person that has a particular issue. But then that particular person has a network. Do you know that we actually group ourselves into rich and poor, smokers and non-smokers, based on our problems and our status, married and non-married? Good. So, for instance now, I want to conduct a study about smokers. I get one smoker. I tell him, who are your friends? You say, go to that Katsina man. He smokes. No, it's their pastime, don't worry. It's nothing personal. They smoke. So he will tell you the next Katsina man. So you see, you are sampling, please listen, you are sampling based on the recommendation of another sample. And you are sampling in a chain. You are sampling, another name for snowball and chain sampling technique is network sampling technique. Now, somebody might ask you, at what point do you stop sampling? Yes. Saturation. What is this saturation? It is that point. Meanwhile, there's one very good thing about qualitative research. The data collection and the data analysis are done simultaneously. Yes. And that is why you can reach a saturation point. So what is this saturation point? Saturation point is that point where the more you sample, no new information is coming. It's the same thing they are saying. For instance, people, if I'm going to ABU Zaria, I want to know the Senate of ABU Zaria, and I enter through the main gate. The first person I meet, I ask him, please, where is the Senate? He turns and shows me that tall building. The second person turns and shows me that tall building. The third person shows me that tall building. At what point, if I'm not stupid, will I stop asking? Do you understand me? So at that point where no new information is coming, is that saturation point. And that's why, please listen, people, based on the design, I know you have asked the last speaker, what is the adequate sample size? How many of you have heard of Jean Piaget?
Yes, educationist.
Jean Piaget conducted the study that produced the theory of cognitive development with 2 children, his own. 2. 2 as sample. So do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. Thank you. Next slide. Now, this is another side. Data analysis. In qualitative researches, we collect textual data. We collect words. We interact with our respondents. They gist us. They tell us stories. Meanwhile, in qualitative researches, the analysis is to look for a pattern in what they have said. Is to look for patterns in what they have said. Now, there are 2 major types of analysis that we can do. We can do thematic analysis. Now, even in thematic analysis, there are 2 ways of coding. There is deductive coding, there is inductive coding. So how do we do deductive coding? I'll give you an example. If you have your research questions or the objectives of your study, the objectives will form the codes. So, for instance, if I ask you, tell me what you know, please tell me about fire. Somebody says fire is pain. Somebody says it burns. Go. Somebody says it is red. That's the first person. He has given you all that. So for you to code in your research question, go back to your research question. The research question says, what is the knowledge of people on fire? So, if you're doing deductive coding, you say knowledge of fire. Go. Yes. Say red. You say burns. Go. Yes. And you say all those things. Meanwhile, in qualitative data analysis, we do what we call data reduction. You'll be reducing one after the other, until you get a pattern. And then in that pattern, you label the pattern. Now, the differences between thematic analysis and qualitative content analysis is the fact that in thematic analysis, you label the categories that come out. In qualitative content analysis, you stop at categories. Now, there are also three types of qualitative content analysis. There is summative content analysis. In summative content analysis, you have to count the number of codes that appear for a particular category. In directed content analysis is similar to deductive coding in thematic analysis. You direct all your codes to a particular code. Then there is the conventional content analysis, where you leave the categories to come out of the data. Next slide. Questions, ladies and gentlemen. Before I take questions, I have to warn you. Any one of you that is intending to undertake a qualitative research should be very, very careful. You need to read why. Your weapon are literature that you have in your pocket. When they say, why did you do this? You say, see the literature. Just in line with what the last speaker said, every decision, you should have a pointer to that decision. And because qualitative research is fairly new, and it's still evolving, not many people understand it. You have to be very careful. That's not to tell you that you should not undertake it. Just like the last speaker said, your choice of methodology is a product of the problem you intend to solve. Questions, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, sir.
The facilitator.
Yes.
Very rich presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Please, just one question.
I know.
Yeah. It's about the instrument.
I know.
Specifically used for data collection.
I know. You asked a particular question to the previous about focus group and interviews.
Yes, so we want
I
to
intend to.
okay.
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
After I've taken a sip of this. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, people. How else do you gather the experience of people except through social interaction? Do you agree with me?
Yes.
What do you think about this? You have to ask the person, right? They'll tell you this is that, this is that, this is that. And so, most of the meanings that we get from qualitative studies are gotten through social interaction, interviews. That's not to say quantitative researchers don't use interview. There is what we call structured interview. That is a quantitative instrument. Now, semi-structured to unstructured are the tools that you use in qualitative research. Now, the fact that something is structured means you don't give the respondent the option to say what he feels. You structure even the responses. What are the information resources in your library? Do you have books? He says yes. Do you have journals? He says yes. Do you have dictionaries? You say yes. Say thank you. Next. What information services do you provide? Do you provide translation services? He says yes. You tick. And for you to have a structured interview, you need it. A structured interview is another name for a checklist. Now, you asked about focus group and semi-structured interview. Basically, what we do with focus group is we bring people together and we ask their opinion. But meanwhile, in literature, you don't actually analyze focus group interview. Focus group interview is used for pilot study. Yes, you heard me right. Pilot study. They use it to refine your interview questions and for you to know the particular people that will give you information. Are you okay, sir?
Yes.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
I particularly... And then there's one more, please. That stone wall behind me said something about Meshai. The stone wall said the Meshai suffered. In the audience today, there's my wife and my children. They will attest to the fact that I used 2 months going to Meshai in participant observation. I had to be one of them. I had to be one of them. And they never knew I was collecting data. Because it was not a harmful thing. And the participant interview was actually to refine my research questions and to particularly know the people that will give me information. Now, in all researches, there's something we call triangulation. You don't collect data from just one source. Let me give you an example. You are interviewing somebody, or excuse me.
Sorry.
In a focus group interview, everybody is there, right?
Yes.
You ask somebody, do you know mathematics? He say, I sabi maths now. He shock you, say, I sabi maths. But before then, you have secondary data of their performances in maths. You look at it, he has F. So let him just talk. Yes. Do you know maths? Yes, sabi maths. What did you get in maths? You say A1 for this F9 here. These are the reasons why you must triangulate. Triangulation in qualitative research lends power and validity to your results. And one way to triangulate is to use different methods of data collection. You can also use, there's something we call method triangulation, there's something we call technique triangulation. Instead of using just thematic analysis, you use thematic and summative content analysis. Questions, please? Yes, Mr. Paul.
I just want to add, you use Meshai.
Yes.
In some areas, you find it difficult to understand what Meshai is.
Yes.
If you are conducting a research,
Yes.
since the language, official language is English, so what did you use in place of the Shai, although there is operational discussion of that?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Those social places per se. T-shirts.
Then, lastly, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of qualitative research?
Thank you very much. I was coming here. Now, from the topic there, the last topic, you see that I said exploring social spaces for information activities. Madam, among social actors has been tried. What in bracket? T-shirts. Because of language. Don't worry, ABU is ABU is not just big, we are intellectually bigger than any other. You see that rock there is studied in Russia. We have all sorts of people. We are we are intellectually bigger than most places in the world, because our scholars, my major supervisor studied in the US. That stone behind me, Russia. So don't worry, we are internationally known. So don't worry, language is not a problem.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Mr. Paul. Don't worry, I've not forgotten about your question. I will still answer.
So I want to ask a question. When you started explaining qualitative research, you say there is no absolute truth. Truth is subjective.
Yes.
And it is relative.
Yes.
And looking from the perspective of features of qualitative research that you have explained, you say it is not geared towards generalization.
Yes, sir.
You gave us an analogy of an elephant,
Yes.
whereby everybody sees from his own perspective.
Yes, sir.
Then, when we come to report our findings, how can we generalize so that we can take decisions?
Okay, sorry, I'm going to use your question and Oga's question. Please remind me of that question. I know you said so. And disadvantages. Good, thank you. You see, in research, you don't just say these are the disadvantages or these are the advantages. In research, you call them limitations. Now, one of the limitations of qualitative research is the fact that you cannot generalize. Now, and that's why your research in qualitative research starts from your discussion of findings. One other thing that I did not say is the fact that I did not explain axiology, the position of the researcher in the research. In quantitative research, there's something we call ethic perspective, meaning the researcher doesn't even mingle with anything, he just experiments and records. In qualitative research, the meaning that the researcher has comes into the research too. The researcher is inside the research, and so that is called the emic approach. Now, at the end of the day, findings or no findings, and that's why in literature, you see that discussion of findings in literature globally, every research question has a chapter for discussion of findings. So you see a research with 10 chapters. By virtue of the findings, you don't generalize even the finding. You say it as it is. You say it as it is. You back up with literature, that's all. Now, just like I said, the advantages of this is that you get in-depth analysis of the problem. Let me give you an example. Let me draw an analogy. You are a teacher in the secondary school and they bring two boys that are fought. You ask them, as a quantitative researcher, you ask them, what caused this fight? guy says, he slapped me. How many times? Say, he slapped me 4 times. Even in the scriptures, in the Bible, they say, turn the other cheek. Go. How many times? Pa, pa. If he adds another one, you know it will cause wahala. Right? Now you are using a law. Just like I said, you are using a law, you now conclude that, even in the Bible says, turn the other cheek. But this one exceeded that turn the other cheek. That is the cause of the fight. And he slapped him 5 times. As a qualitative researcher, you ask him, what caused the fight? You now say he slapped him. You don't stay there. Why? Why did you slap me? He insulted my mother. You now say, mother is a very important thing to people. So anybody that insults even my own mother, I will fight him. You understand? So you see, the same thing, the same scenario, but different. Meanwhile, the qualitative researcher went deeper than the quantitative researcher. The quantitative researcher just counted how many times they slapped. Abi? Yes. And then he backed up that with the scriptures. Scripture is law, right? Yeah. Even in the Bible, it says, turn the other cheek. You slap him 4 times. You are people where you know come out your own teeth. So do you understand? The issue is not that one of the advantages of qualitative research is in-depth analysis. And that in itself is actually a part of the limitations of qualitative research. Now, that stone right there, that pillar, we were gossiping about the first presenter, and he said, Dakai Kapara. And I said, yes. I was supposed to start the presentation before the quantitative, because research is a continuum between quantitative and qualitative. Now, listen to me, understand me. You start with the qualitative research. Nothing is known about a phenomenon. The product of your qualitative research are variables. You use quantitative research to test those variables, and you confirm that they are the issue. So you see, research is dynamic. It's a flow from qualitative to quantitative through mixed methodology. So you see, there are debates, but the debates are just debates. They don't actually tell you that one methodology is better than the other. Questions? Yes, sir.
Okay, please, I want to ask, what are the factors that researchers should take into consideration before carrying out a qualitative research? Another thing is that what statistical tools should be used in analyzing qualitative research?
Thank you very much. You see, factors that you have to consider to undertake qualitative research. Now, when you find a phenomenon that's not too many things is known about them, or now, basically, qualitative research looks for nuances, differences in meanings of particular groups of people, or the meanings they have for a particular phenomenon. 1. Not many things are known about the phenomenon. 1. 2. Most of the phenomena that we study in qualitative research are social phenomena. Then you said which statistical tools? There's no statistics in qualitative research. There is statistics, but not in the way you know it. Not in the way you know it. Just like I told you, in summative content analysis, you count. By counting, I mean constant comparison. You say this pattern that has come out, how many people? It doesn't mean because one pattern has just one person, it's better or it's less than another pattern that has 20. It's not about the number. It is about the existence of a pattern, of a particular code. So basically, qualitative researches are conducted when in-depth analysis of a particular phenomenon is required, especially when those phenomena are not known, they are not too researched. Meanwhile, that's why I told you that everything is about ground rules. What are the rules of qualitative research? We want to know the meanings of people. People, what do you have? How do you see this particular thing? And because of that, not many people, you see our statement of problem will sound like, even as studies have been conducted to find, for instance, studies have been conducted. Let me give you an hypothetical example. You see, these are women. God bless you. Say amen. Amen. Good. Now, our women, especially in northern Nigeria, even when they get to professors, when they give back, they do what we call jego. Outside guys say hi. Hi. Good. You know why? If your wife puts to bed, you will know the definition of heat. Your room will have charcoal. The fridge, they will put off the fridge. Go back. Now, but the antenatal care information that is supposed to handle that did not specifically say that women should take hot water. It did not particularly say that if you put to bed, you cannot drink cold water. But woe betide you if you put to bed, women, your mother-in-law or your mother is seeing you and you open fridge, you won't drink, they will slap you with spoon. So what am I saying? What is their understanding of antenatal care service? So even as studies have looked at the advantages and the roles of antenatal in taking care of the baby and the mother postnatal, there is still low utilization of antenatal. So there is the particular and critical need to explore the knowledge of Hausa women on antenatal care service. So you see, because you are exploring the knowledge or experiences or how they construct knowledge, it will be very hard for you to see another study that is like your own. You understand? Even when you are transferring context, I just said Hausa women. What of Yoruba women? I'll transfer everything I do in my study to record the experiences of Yoruba women. Somebody might take and say, okay, Ijo women, another set of women. And that is why we cannot generalize. You understand? We cannot generalize. Thank you. Have I answered your question? Yes. Thank you. Question? Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful presentation, sir. Sir, my question is on the exposure of results. If you cite a particular reference, that reference must have been previously captured in the literature review? That's my question.
Oh. That's a very good one. You see, in quantitative research, in some quarters, they believe that before you can use a particular literature to back your finding, you must have stated it in your literature review. It's not always so. Now, in qualitative researches, for instance, I told you, you will hardly find studies that are like your story. When you ask the other presenter, I told you, when you have limited literature on particulars, you can do qualitative research to know it in depth. Now, if for instance, you have to state, you are supposed to even ask me, how do I do literature review in chapter 4 in qualitative research? Now, you look for literature that says It depends on your own perspective. And that's another place where qualitative research differs from quantitative. The researcher and his knowledge is what he will weave together and discuss findings. For instance, in my work on Mishai, I found out that there are other spaces where people go to, just like Mishai, like the markets and other places. And I found out that in there is a verification system for information. Somebody will go there and sit and tell you, well, like that bomb blast in Niger State, only 10 people died. They reported in the news that 10 people said, you know the news is flawed. They are up to 100, and you agree? Amen. You go there and they are talking about wives and say, if you are really a man, a real man, you must marry 2 and above. And that guy will just go home. He will wait for, maybe it's non-academic, I'm sorry to say. He will wait for end allowance that he did not earn. When they give him 300,000, or he will take a loan and go and marry so that he will belong to that group in the house. And you understand? He wants to belong. So it's a verification system. In there are issues that you bring that they will discuss and they will help you form opinion. If you go out and somebody says, Salaam alaikum, you know if you answer him, just because of the value system in there. You understand? So as a researcher, if you see a thing like that, you are not going to say, it's a value system that you say, okay. The social spaces that we have are actually places for verifying information. You now look for literature for verification systems. What are verification systems? You see, it is not new in library and information science literature that there is a verification system. Or in there are groups. If you belong to the group, you must act like the group. And so there is a particular theory that speaks about small world. Small world is a group of people that think alike and do things alike. So you say, this finding of my study that there is a verification system is not new in library science literature. Because Chapman, in a theory of information and normative behavior, has really shown that there are things that we call small world. Small world people behave alike. They even don't take information from outside. You understand? So it's not sacrosanct that you must present a literature in your chapter 2 before you can use it to discuss it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
One more thing, please. At the end of the day, we started with games. Let's end with games. How can you be a referee when you don't know the rules of the game? Thank you, people.
Thank you. So, thank you, Doctor, for a wonderful presentation. Actually, you did a very good presentation. You made justice for.
Sorry, can I sit down?
Yes, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of today's workshop. So, I am going to give the chief host to give us a closing remark. Thank you.
Well, I want to believe that all of us that are here, we don't regret coming. Because we have added to our knowledge what is it about research. How I wish there was no ASU strike. I would have assumed that probably about 3 or 4 sets of hours to be here. Nevertheless, we have done what we are supposed to do. And I want to believe that we have done something, and by next session would have already made all that is required of us. So thank you very much for being with us. The acting university librarian
and the librarian of Nile. I want to thank you most sincerely for being with us, and the presenters as well. We very much appreciate what they have presented, and I'm sure in the next class we will be able to meet up to expectation. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
So, gentlemen and ladies, we are meeting tomorrow, by God's grace, around 8:30 a.m. here in the same venue. So we are starting with mixed method research. Thank you.